I'm Kristen, and this is Kristen is Fully Booked. Today I'm going to be doing a wrap-up for all of the books that I've been reading recently. This is my first wrap-up for 2022. It is sort of a January wrap-up, or at least that's what I titled the video, but you guys know that I do just recent reads videos, and this one happened to be timing up or aligning with the end of the month, so I thought I'd go for that. I have 7 books to talk about today, and I don't want to spend too much time. I'm really going to try to work on being a little more succinct with my wrap-ups this year and not focusing so much on my in-depth thoughts about every single book unless there's one that I'm like really riled up or passionate about, and instead doing like a really brief synopsis and then hopefully focusing more on keywords to tag you guys or to catch your attention to see if it's a book that you might be interested in. So let's jump right into it. The first book that I read in this year is Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. This is a young adult fantasy fairy tale retelling of the Goose Girl story, but it's told from the usually villainous role, the servant who steals the identity of a princess. And she actually is using this identity of the princess and the access that grants her to moonlight as a jewel thief in order to escape the debt that she owes to her godparents' death and fortune. I did do a full review, so feel free to check that book out, especially if you want more in-depth details about whether or not this book might or might not work for you. I really personally love Margaret Owen's writing style. It is very funky and unique. There's a little bit of a dark bent and humor to it. This wasn't a perfect book for me. I do think that the pacing was a little bit off. It had a very clear first half and second half shift in the tone and what we were focusing on. There was sort of a villain that was maybe just bad for the sake of being bad, or that could have been further explored or foundation more laid for it at the beginning of the book. But overall, I did have a really fun time with this. It was a perfect book for me at the time that I read it. It was exactly the right kind of fun, upbeat way to start my reading year. And the keywords that I wrote down for this book were fun, funky, con artist, upbeat, traumatic past, morally gray main character, and enemies to lovers. Then I read Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, and this is the first book in the Farseer trilogy. It's also the first chronological book in the realm of the Elderlings, and I read this as a buddy read with Maria. We are doing a full buddy read of the realm of the Elderlings together. In this first book, we are following Fitz, who is the illegitimate son of the heir to a throne in the Six Duchies, who is unceremoniously dropped off at a guardhouse when he is 6 and given over to the royal family to take care of. Because of who his father is, because he could potentially become a problem in the future, the royal family decides to keep him close, but not actually really take him in and care for him. And they kind of manipulate him into loyalty, and they train him in fact to become an assassin. But if you are looking for an assassin training book, look elsewhere. That is really not the focus of this book, despite the title. One of the neatest things about this book for me is the fact that the writing style changes as Fitz grows up. We are first hearing the story from Fitz's 6-year-old perspective, and it really reads like we are in the head of a 6-year-old. There are things happening, and he is taking in conversations that mean nothing to Fitz, that he doesn't quite understand, but we as grown-ups understand what is being said and what is happening here. It is single POV, and in fact, Fitz is telling us his story as a grown-up looking back on his life. I think these snippets from Fitz as a grown-up do a really good job of intriguing the reader to want to keep reading in this series. And I think that's important because as a standalone book on its own, this book definitely has flaws. The ending is very abrupt, and it feels like setup for the rest of the series in terms of laying out Fitz's life, getting to understand why he is the way that he is based on all of these experiences that he's had as a child and how he was brought up. And in order to want to pick up the next book in this series, I think you really need those snippets from grown-up Fitz in order to make you be intrigued to continue on, because otherwise the book is just kind of okay, I think, on its own. I had a much harder time coming up with keywords for this book, but I will share them anyway. They were classic fantasy, assassin, lonely, rushed endings, and moments that make you go, oh. The next book that I finished was Tigana by Guy Gavriel. This is a book that I started reading back in, I guess I have it. It's in my cupboards. I started reading this back in December, but I only finished it in January. It was a much slower read for me. This is a reread. I read this book when I was quite young, and so it's been, I'm not going to say, but it's been over a decade, much more than a decade since I last read this book, so I did not remember much of what happened outside of one particular storyline. In this book, we are focused in on this area of land or peninsula of a few different provinces that roughly 20 years ago were conquered slowly by two different sorcerers. Unfortunately, one of the provinces was responsible for the death of one of the sorcerer's sons, and that sorcerer decides to take extreme lengths in vengeance, and he erases the memory and even the ability to hear the name of that province for everyone else in this world. And we follow a grassroots rebellion of trying to take down that original sorcerer. This is multi-POV, but not in the way that you are probably used to. It is sort of more told from like a third-person omniscient narrative perspective, where we are jumping into various characters' heads based on the scene that we are seeing. I would definitely put this book in the literary historical fantasy genre. What's important here is not the characters or the situation, it is the themes that we are exploring. The lengths to which someone will go to maintain a vendetta or vengeance, to hold on to gripes from the past, and how that impacts you and other people and the world that you are in. It is about the conquering of lands and the erasing of culture through the use of language, or through control over language and access to songs and stories and names even of places. Again, I struggled with keywords here, but I wrote down thematic, tearjerker, and rebellion. I don't think those do it justice. I will maybe consider doing a full review for this book if this is something that you want, and I will obviously talk more about it in my Where to Start with Guide of Okay video coming to you shortly. I finished A Song of Flight by Julia Marillier. This is another book that I started back in December and just finished in January. This is the third and final book in the Warrior Bards trilogy, which to date is my least favorite series by Julia Marillier. In this series, we are following three different characters who are training to become spies/mercenaries. There is a separate, distinct problem in each of the three books, and a magical problem within the world overarching all three. In this book, the time division and focus was significantly more on that overarching problem that has to do with these magical evil crows. Even the characters whose job it is that they are being paid for to find this missing person totally seem to brush that aside when they find more information or feel like there's something happening with this other or overarching problem. In this series, two, definitely, if not three, of the points of view are written in first person present tense, which I really disliked. The one saving grace here is that because it was such a simple way of looking at certain events, the more significant, like emotionally heavy moments were very brief and succinct and written in this writing, that it actually almost made them hit a little bit harder because there was this simplicity to those moments that you felt so much more than what was written there. It's unfortunate because I feel like there was an attempt here to write a female character. One of the three characters that we follow is a woman who is a warrior, and I feel like it was an attempt to have a woman character that's more of a fighter and a warrior, which is not usually the main characters that she writes. And I just feel like it wasn't quite a success. Like, that's not what she's best at, because there are almost no fighting scenes or times in which Lavon is fighting or using her skill in arms or battle or anything. Keywords that I wrote here are fairy tale, woodsy, atmospheric, and classically good main characters. Then I read A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers. This is a novella following a tea monk and a robot. Talk about right book at the right time for me. We follow the monk Dex, who at the beginning of the book changes career paths or vocations and switches from being a garden monk to become a tea monk. One day on their travels, Dex runs into a robot named Mosscap, who is on a mission to learn more about humans. I cried almost immediately in this book, and quite frequently throughout it. I don't think I have ever felt more understood personally by a book than I have while reading Dex's experience. There are only 8 chapters. I think the first 3 and the final 2 had the most significant moments and impactful explorations of experience and internal goings on. So here's what I'll say about this novella, because I don't think it's going to have the same impact for everyone that picks it up. If you are feeling meh about your life, if you are feeling the need for something different, if you are not totally satisfied with where you are career-wise, life milestone-wise, situationally, if something feels off for you, or if you are looking for more, then I think this novella is worth picking up. Keywords here are hopeful, tearjerker, cozy, quiet, and book for when you're having a life or career crisis. Then I read Benyu Born of Ash by Katie Feevel. I received a free eARC from Netgalley for an honest review for this book, and this book just came out on January 18th. It's the first book in a new fantasy series. I would definitely put this into the fantasy romance category, but I don't know if it is technically that. There's definitely a romantic subplot here that is a significant part of the plot. We follow a neurodivergent main character who is definitely not understood in her small village. She also has a type of magic that is very feared and almost frowned upon, and this puts her very separate from everyone else in her village. However, when her village is being harassed by neighboring enemy woodlanders, she enters into a very brash blood contract with the General Galen. Overall, I enjoyed this book in a very page-turning, want to find out what happens kind of a way. But overall, I don't think this is quite the right book for me, even though I do love a good fantasy romance. There was a lot of manipulation going on in this book, and I really felt like the main character was being taken advantage of by a lot of different sources, and there were times when she felt and seemed to be aware that this was happening. But her attraction to the guy and the contract that she has with him always seemed to negate her realizations of what was going on. And this is a book where I genuinely was not sure if I was supposed to be rooting for them to be together because of some stuff that was happening. At various times I felt like, no, this is a misdirect, this is a Tamlin. Other times where I felt like actually they were mated partners here. So I really struggled with understanding that. I have seen some of the characters written as morally gray, and I wouldn't quite say that. It just felt manipulative, and that really bothered me. I would put the comps here for any book by Sarah J. Maas and the Blood and Ash series. I felt like there were a lot of relevant comparisons to that book, both in style and plot and world building and themes. Keywords here, I put fated mates. That's a suspicion on my part, not an established fact or a spoiler. Chaotic, secrets, fast-paced, mystery, conspiracy, manipulation, and chosen one. And the most recent book that I read was House of Earth and Blood by Sarah J. Maas. This is the first book in the Crescent City series, and this was a reread for me in preparation for the next book, the second book in the series, House of Sky and Breath, which will be coming out on February 15th. We follow half-fae party girl and secret badass 25-year-old Bryce Quinlan and 233-year-old Angel Hunt Athalar in this kind of buddy cop mystery, like murder mystery urban fantasy setup. While there are definitely some classic SJM familiar feelings and vibes and characters in this book, the world itself is quite different. It is very urban fantasy. I actually quite enjoy it. It's sort of like our world, but if there was like this rip in the universe and everything from fae to angels to vampires, witches, shifters, all of that entered into our world, and because of their power superiority, let's say, the humans have become sort of a second-class citizen in this world, and that definitely plays into the thematic tone of this book. There were some really nice tongue-in-cheek references to like alpha holes, where she would, and our main character would describe, maybe too often, the possessive, purring, growling, dominant, overprotective, overbearing male leads that we have seen in the past. Grief and mental health are huge in this book, but not in the way that I found annoying about A Court of Silver Flames and Nesta's story. I definitely cried in this book when I first read it. I cried again when I was reading it recently. There was definitely some leveling up at the end of this book in a very Sarah J. Maas way that has me very intrigued, but also pretty nervous about the direction of the next book and this series. I'm worried that it will lose that unique tone of like fun buddy cop mystery that was kind of unique for Sarah J. Maas in this book, and I worry that it is going in the direction of like expansion with Throne of Glass. Before I do the keywords, if you haven't already read this book and you haven't heard anything about this book, but you think that you want to read it, don't read the synopsis. Something happens towards the beginning of the book that is outright said in the synopsis, and I think it's better to go in not knowing that. So if you haven't already been spoiled to the initiating event, I don't think you should be. I think it'll be better to just read it. So now we'll finish with the keywords. I wrote down urban fantasy, fantasy romance, mental health, mystery, buddy cop, and badass main character. Okay, those are all of the books that I have read to date this year. I will have to finish Guards. By the time that you are seeing this, Monday night, I have my book club. I have to have finished Guards, so I will technically also finish that in January, but this is just a recent reads and not officially a January wrap-up. Anyway, I'll talk about that obviously next time. Let me know how the start to your year has been. Reading-wise, are you on track with your reading goals, or are you slowly easing into your new reading goals? I'm doing a little mix of both. There are some things that I'm doing really well. There are some things that I am still working on implementing into my new habits. But I will leave it at that for today. If you just want to let me know that you're still here, that you made it to the end of the video, put an angel emoji in the comments for our male lead hunt, Athalar in Crescent City. And if you like what I do here, don't forget to like and hit subscribe if you would like to see more of my videos regularly. I post videos on every Monday and Thursday. I'll see you next time. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.